Okay. Here we go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Friends of the Schindler House, or FOSH, as we call it, our fifth Schindler Talk of 2025. My name's Ann Clark, and I'm a volunteer with Friends of the Schindler House, and I'm also an architect. I work with one of our board members on the development committee. For those of you joining us for the first time, FOSH manages the maintenance, preservation, and restoration of the Kings Road House, or the Schindler House, and we work to raise funds and awareness about this special house. For those of you returning, we welcome you and thank you for being a part of this online community that we have developed over the last few years, inspired by Rudolph and Pauline Schindler. One of the things that the Friends of the Schindler House are currently working on is a comprehensive master plan, which will ensure the legacy of the Schindler House and this treasure of a piece of architecture. It's really been my privilege to organize these talks that were inspired by salons that Rudolph and Pauline Schindler hosted at the home, the Kings Road House in West Hollywood. Pauline's attitude really was to welcome everyone to the home for conversation about music, art, architecture, philosophy, politics, whatever interested them at the time, and I'm sure there was a little bit of fun going on. So we decided we wanted to create an online salon, if you will, called Schindler Talk. And it's our intention to welcome everybody to these conversations and grow a community that is inspired by the Schindler House, Pauline, and Rudolph Schindler. So before we get started, I just want to let you know that we are recording this, and we do have a YouTube channel, and it will be put up there probably within the week. There are all of our talks from the last 2 years on the YouTube channel as well, so you can go back and see them if you've missed them, or you're joining for the first time and you're curious about what we've talked about in the past. Tonight we'll be in conversation with Lisa Germany and Todd Cronan. The focus is going to be on architect Harwell Hamilton Harris, of whom Lisa has written a book. Lisa Germany is a writer who has written extensively on American architecture. She's the author of Harwell Hamilton Harris, a monograph of the influential California modernist, and Houses of the Sundown Sea, a portrait of Malibu architect Harry Gesner. In 2007, the Harry and Abrams Publishing Company commissioned her to write the book Great Houses of Texas, collaborating with architectural photographer Grant Mudford. She played a major role in the production of the American Institute of Architects Guide to Dallas Architecture. For the city of Austin, she also wrote a series of historical architectural walking tours. She's been an occasional critic for Texas Monthly and the New York Times, amongst other publications. She's a recipient of the Texas Society of Architects Flowers Award for Media Excellence and a 1996-97 Loeb Fellow at Harvard University's Graduate School of Design. She received her BA and MA degrees in art history from the University of Texas at Austin, and she currently lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Todd Cronan, who is also on our board at Friends of the Schindler House, is a professor of art history, teaches modern art and architecture at Emory University in Atlanta. He's the author of Against Effective Formalism, Matisse, Bergson, Modernism, Red Aesthetics, Rodchenko, Brecht, and Eisenstein, Nothing Permanent, Modern Architecture in California, and is the editor of Minor White's Memorable Fancies from the Princeton University Press. He also writes for popular magazines like The Nation, Jacobin, the Los Angeles Review of Books, Brooklyn Rail, and the Chronicle for Higher Education. He is the founder and editor-in-chief of nonsite.org and sits on the board of the Friends of the Schindler House, as I mentioned. He's a native Los Angelino and grew up in the San Fernando Valley. So I am going to turn it over to Todd and Lisa. And I also wanted to, just so you know, if anybody can tell me right now, I want to make sure that the chat is enabled. I put some links in there. Can somebody just let me know that that is actually working? You can also put questions in the Q&A, and I'll be monitoring those and interjecting if it makes sense. Otherwise, we'll hold questions until the end. Todd and Lisa will talk for 35, 45 minutes. Depends how long it goes. There's a lot of stuff to cover tonight. So hang in there and just send me your questions. All right, Todd and Lisa, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. All right, so let's dive right in. I'm going to share my screen here.
Okay, so I'm just going to say that the chat is not working, so the Q&A is working. So we're gonna stick with that. Okay.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
All right. So I am very thrilled to be here chatting with Lisa about Harwell Hamilton Harris. I bought this book along with everyone else that I know that was interested in modern architecture in California, and uh, it's I mean it is truly the definitive volume on Harris. Really a remarkable piece of work that I go back to over and over and over again. And I'll just mention also that there's the earlier volume, this one. You see them both on the screen. And you can the University of Texas Press is that what the right is that the right publisher?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That volume is still available on Amazon, and I encourage you to get it if you don't have it. And we'll try and make the case today that Harwell Harris really is one of the very, very great architects. Maybe if you don't know his work, hopefully tonight you will be converted. And now I should say I was so interested in Harwell Harris's work, and I'll say why in just a second, that I tracked Lisa down, which wasn't super easy actually. I think this was probably in like 2020. I tracked her down, and then we started having some conversations about Harris, and I'm really very, very happy to be here chatting with her about Harris today. This has been a few years in the making. All right. Here is a photograph. Of a very cheerful looking Harwell Harris at his Pumphrey house in the Santa Monica Canyon. Now,
Todd,
yep,
let me just interject.
yep,
Listeners, keep this image in mind because we're going to look at the same house and we're going to see how this this fascia that you're looking at is going to seem so much smaller because the photographer really captured this dynamism, and it's going to surprise you to see to compare the two.
definitely.
Okay, so
Um, yeah, no, th this is one of those houses. It's in the Santa Monica Canyon, and it is right up against where the fire was. And I remember watching very closely the night of it was happening, and this street, which has several important houses on it, watching to see if what would make it and what wouldn't. And by a miracle, this street made it through. And I'll show you one other very nearby that also made it through, and then one that didn't. This is the one that did, in fact. And this is one of his most important houses, and it's his first house, the Low House in Altadena of 1933, 34, which is, as you can see, made of wood, and it burned down with so many other houses in Altadena. I tragically lost this. It survived almost 100 years. So from 1935 until the mid 1950s, Harwell Harris was among the most influential and highly publicized modern architects practicing in the United States. In 1935, Harris's first work, the Low House, you see it here, was the subject of a very public plagiarism scandal. Two East Coast architects copied and published his work, and this scandal precipitously raised Harris's artistic stature. It was great for businesses, if you like. In 1937, his Fellowship Park House, I'll show you that here, which was very highly publicized. His Fellowship Park House won the House Beautiful Small House competition and the first prize in the Pittsburgh Glass Institute competition, a prize he also won the following year for the Bauer House in 38. Fred Dapprich photographs, on many of which I'll show you tonight, of the Fellowship Park House circulated widely throughout the U.S. and European architectural magazines. Eames and Saarinen went to the house in 1940, and they both consulted with Harris about building a studio for Francis Rich. Harris was the recipient of a unprecedented 15-page retrospective of his early work. That is to say, 6 houses were represented in Architectural Forum in 1940. The feature began by stating that the Low House, which I showed you just a second ago, that's the one that burned down in Altadena, was one of the best houses they had ever seen. That's Architectural Forum. He was extensively covered by the Museum of Modern Art in exhibitions like the Wooden House in America in 1941, or Five California Houses, that's there on the left, of 1943. He's well represented in Elizabeth Mock's Built in USA, 1932 to 44. That book and exhibition was of 1944. And Mock's If You Want to Build a House of 1946, there on the right. He was illustrated more than any other architect except Frank Lloyd Wright. Harris was also heavily featured in George Nelson and Henry Wright's very popular architecture guide, Tomorrow's House of 1945. And again, his work appeared no less than 14 photographs throughout the book, second most represented the book, and the first was Wright. When Harris's Havens house was featured in Life magazine, and I'll show you that in a second, rather in a few minutes, his Havens house was featured in Life magazine in 1949. They called it the most spectacular house in the United States. And in 1957, the Havens House in Berkeley was ranked by Architectural Record as the 9th most significant house of the first half of the 20th century, tied with Richard Neutra's Lovell House and just above Mies van der Rohe's Farnsworth House. And as late as 1959, this is a kind of unusual document, Louis Kahn selected Harris as the 5th most significant living architect after Neutra, Saarinen, Johnson, and himself in the Creative Architect Personality Study. If you don't know that, that's this book that was published a few years ago from an unpublished study, that a psychological study that took place in 1959. Photographs of Harris's work were distributed widely by Dapprich, who I mentioned. Maynard Parker was another photographer closely associated with him. Julius Schulman, I'll show you several of those. And strikingly by Man Ray, the surrealist photographer Man Ray, and Andre Cartez. So he was also the subject of extensive art photography. And his work appeared in Architectural Forum no less than 10 times in his first 10 years as a designer. So more or less in every issue he appears for the first 10 years of his practice. Architectural Record, Progressive Architecture, California Arts and Architecture, and Interiors, as well as popular magazines like House Beautiful, Time, Life, Sunset, House and Home, and House and Garden. Now, we'll come to later as to what happened. That's to say, now that I've mentioned how important his architecture was really from this period from 1935 to the mid-50s, I'd say till about 55, he was at the absolute center of the architectural universe during those 20 years. What happened? Well, he moved to Texas, and he was taught at the University of Texas School of Architecture from 52 to 55, and then went into private practice in Texas, and then finally moved to North Carolina. And these are things that Lisa will touch on in a few minutes. And I think his move from California to Texas affected his reputation. So rather precipitously, I would say, in the mid to late 50s, his stature declined. And that's a shame. I think he's worthy of a kind of renewed attention, to say the least. Now, I'm just going to touch on very briefly how I came to Harris before I turn it over to Lisa. In 1998, it was either 97 or 98, took photographs I was taking photographs of Schindler houses, as many as I could find. And across the street from the Howe House is this house, Schindler's Howe House is this house, the Hawk House from 1939. And the owner just waved me in. Here you can see the Hawk House across the street from Schindler's Howe House. And Harris, without a doubt, is in dialogue with the Schindler House. It's a kind of counterpoint, if you like, something we can touch on later. And here's my photograph of the interior. So he invited us in, and I was blown away. I was really massively impressed by it. I didn't know who Harris was. This is in Silver Lake. And really from that point on, I pursued his architecture diligently alongside Schindler and Neutra and all the other, and Gregory Ain and the rest. And here's a view of the interiors, and it's, as I say, very, very closely in dialogue with one another. I won't go into this now, but I just want to say that I think what Harris is trying to do is create a sense of continuity with his architecture and break down what he's calling here the cell. but he is also wants to give equal attention, as it were, to the module. So he has a rhythmic module that he deploys throughout his spaces, but he also wants it, he does not want that module to break the sense of what he's calling here the feeling of space beyond. And that's part of, I think, his dialogue with Schindler. I think that Schindler, he thinks that Schindler's houses are closed, and he wants his to kind of expand. Again, these are things we can kind of come back to. And here's another view of the interior. This is, again, going right back to the beginning of my uh, um, experience of Harris's work. And I just want to say briefly about something characteristic of Harris is he tells a story about his own development over and over again throughout the whole of his life as a kind of series of revelations, which is exactly how he describes them. He describes in 1921, while he's camping and reading this book by Alfred Russel Wallace, Social Environment and Moral Progress. And it's a book about evolution. And I think he was profoundly shaped by Darwinian ideas of evolution, and that everything is connected, I think is his basic principle. From the smallest cell to the cosmic, to the cosmos is one unity is, I think, at the center of his architectural thinking. So he reads Wallace, and then in 24, he reads Sullivan's Autobiography of an Idea. I don't think he'd seen any architecture at this point, but he's deeply moved by Sullivan's autobiography, which has a similar set of interest in evolutionary ideas. And then in 1925, he goes to this Frank Lloyd Wright's Hollyhock House, and he describes this as a revelation. Always throughout the whole of his life, on through the 80s, he comes back to the Hollyhock House as being this absolutely fundamental shaping experience for his whole life. And again, what he sees with Wright is a sense of continuity, a kind of sculptural continuity, that it's all one molded object. And that is what he's fascinated by. And here's a photograph of him from 1940 at the Hollyhock House. That's in 25. And in 26, he sees some Chinese sculpture, paintings and sculpture at LACMA, Los Angeles County Museum of Art. And that too is, he describes as a formative experience for him as an architect. In particular, it was a donation of a extensive 350 some pieces of Chinese sculpture and painting that was donated to LACMA in 1926. And this was a transformative moment for him. And then finally is, of course, the Schindler House, which he goes to after reading Sullivan, after seeing the Hollyhock House. Then he goes a kind of cold call to the Schindler House and meets there Richard Neutra and R.M. Schindler. And this is the last of his kind of transformative experiences, in which galvanized his sense as to what an architect, what it meant to be an architect. And this is likely where he sat in the Schindler House, as it looks like today. These are in the Grant Mudford photographs, and soon became a draftsman in the Schindler and in Neutra's design practice. And now I will hand it over to Lisa to pick up from there.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that you're exactly right about how he was forgotten. And when I started, when I was assigned to do the catalog, I spent hours and hours with Harwell. I fully expected when I went to LA that Greta Grandstaff would open the door. I mean, I had no access, except everything was a cold call, and none of the original clients were there. And so I didn't see as much as I would have liked to have seen, but so I just took everything that Harwell told me and just absorbed it and fed it back into my book. And where possible, later in years to come, I saw some things from the inside. But anyway, I'm actually thrilled to see what Todd has been able to, places he's been able to get into, because I had an editor at Texas Monthly who said, if you go to LA, you have to stay at the Chateau Marmont, which I did. And so I have sort of cast back into this world of the 1930s, and all the characters that I was expecting to see were no longer there. And so anyway, I'm here now, and I'm so excited to be talking to you about Harwell, whom I dearly loved and who taught me so much. So I'll begin. He was born on July the 2nd, 1903, in Redlands, California, and lived there for quite a while. And his father was an architect, and he always said his father wasn't a very good architect. He said he probably didn't even think that there was anything any way he could make it good, or something like that, and or that there was anything that anybody could be good at. But it turns out his father designed a lot of buildings, and some very important buildings. In fact, the librarian at the Redlands Library said that one of his buildings is kind of a mission revival building. It was one of the landmarks in Redlands, and he designed several schools that Harwell went to, but he never believed that they were architecture, and I'll tell you why later. But so then the father grew tired of architecture and decided he wanted to be a rancher, and they moved to El Centro, basically right above the border, and they had a ranch there, but it was all sand. Only a little bit of it had been cleared, and so he spent these early years of his life with teamsters who were out leveling the sand, and it was a really important moment in his life, because he saw how people could do things, how they could work, they could appreciate nature, but do things with it that were helpful. And so and he would drive a horse-drawn sled through the sand and for errands for his mother. But then they moved to Redland, to San Bernardino, right after the World War I started, and there he found this other landscape that he loved. That he would say that the orange groves looked like a chenille bedspread, so endless and perfectly they were planted. So he stayed there, and then from there he went to Pomona College, University, for 1.5 years until his father died from the flu that swept America after the World War I. And so he dropped out of school and spent some time with his mother, who had returned to Los Angeles, where she grew up. In fact, the family homestead was on the site of the current USC campus, so it's interesting. So he was there for a little while with his mother, and then he ultimately went to his favorite place, which was the Imperial Valley, back south, where he had spent so many formative years. So he stayed there, and then he decided to give the Otis Art Institute a chance. He had already tried once before and dropped out, but he decided to give it a second chance. And then he really got swept up into the excitement. He believed that the World War I had broken open the sort of old ways and made room for new ideas. And they were really, they were really a fait accompli at the Otis Institute. He embraced it completely. But he didn't know anything about the modern movement. And so he started looking at every image he could find in the Dial and the Nation, and the Dial started publishing one color picture a month, and he said he began his own little museum. But prior to that, he was reading about Cezanne's color in the Dial and could find no images anywhere to show what the colors were. But anyway, so then from there he started, as Todd said, he started going to the museum and I guess it was the museum, to see the month sculptures. Yeah, and there it is. And but he also came across the sculptures of E. Fimster Proctor, who did bronzes. He was very well known, very famous, and he did sculptures of animals in bronze. But there was this unknown architect working with him, who was also in the gallery, and his name was Harold Schwartz. And Harris, who was always seeking form, that was his, he was constantly looking for form in Beethoven's symphony or in books that he read. And it was just kind of elusive, to me it seemed elusive, idea about the formal nature of objects and ideas and music. And so he immediately sensed form in Harold Schwartz's sculptures. He said, I didn't think he was great, but I sensed a form there. And then he started, so it turns out that Harold Schwartz was teaching at Otis the next semester, which for a class that Harris had already registered. And so to make it explicit, the forms that Harold Schwartz had them working on were Michelangelo's slaves, which were the grandest form of, the grandest example of form trying to make itself known. And so then he started working on like modeling clay, like rolling clay. They would have the pencil thin armature, and they would roll clay. And he was learning how to create sculptures by applying these little pieces of clay. And ultimately, he would say that rolling those pieces of clay in his hand invited form to make itself known. But ultimately, what they really did later on was when he discovered the module, he sensed that it was sort of like building up the sculpture on the armature. When he had the module to work with, he could build up a form by using, the module is a similar measuring measurement that most materials came in, and he loved that idea, and he would break the module down into parts that fit into the 3-foot module that he was using. So the clay sculpture became that kind of a really important touchstone for him, and he was quite good actually. Anyway, then he started taking courses with Stanton McDonald Wright, who was what was called a synchronist. He and his friend Russell Morgan would create space with color, and they would, Stanton McDonald Wright really didn't believe in making his color paintings totally abstract. He'd always like to have a form in them, but using color, he could make the form be in deep space or come to the surface, and he always used, unlike Morgan, he used real natural colors, and he would only use colors you would find in nature. And so Harwell was really impressed by that, and later on he would color was very important to him, and as I'll point out later on, everything he used the most audacious colors in some of the most sublimely simple building small kitchens, but they had just an audacious blast of color. So from there, let me see, we are moving to okay, go back to Schindler, to the Grant Mudford. Yeah. So Harwell was a very shy person, and I find it slightly amazing and he was so private and so respectful of privacy, that I find it slightly amazing that he saw a building after he'd seen Wright's, powerful Barnsdall house. He started looking around LA for interesting buildings that might be modern, like Wright's building was. And he saw this apartment complex, the Jardinette Apartments, and he said it wasn't right, but it was a modern thing. And so he found out that he was told that R.M. Schindler had designed it. So he went to the phone booth, looked up R.M. Schindler in the phone book, and got the address, and drove straight over to his house on Kings Road, knocked on the door, and Schindler invited him in. And it was just kind of slightly amazes me that, Harwell did that. But anyway, especially because I was so shy about going to people's houses. Anyway, so he walked in, and Schindler gave him all these photographs and said, make yourself at home. And what Harris saw as he sat there alone was the cement, the redwood, and he said that and the materials that were like inexpensive material, the most inexpensive materials, cloth, that later was replaced by glass. And it was just, well, I'm going to use his exact words. It was a, wow, it was a moment where it was a rhythmic kind of, because of all the modules. The rhythm was amazing to him, and he finally decided that it must be magic. The place was so enchanted, and then well, just to make that point so real that it was magical, Dion, Neutra's wife, walked through the space with a toga on and barefoot, and that just really, was just hammered that idea in even more. But then right after that, Neutra came in and picked up the photos that Harwell was holding and started to talk to him about him and describing him. And then as they went on, he asked Harwell what his plans were, and he said he was going to he thought he would go to architecture school at Berkeley, but he thought he was too old to go. By this time, he was 23. And, Neutra, being Neutra, said, well, you could learn more from being with me than you could ever learn at architecture school. And so he hired Harris to work on the plans, to draft plans on a on a board resting on a trunk in the drafting room at the Kings Road House. And so, and here he is with Neutra's explaining the foundation, the rebar or whatever, and Harris is on the far. On the far right is Gregory Yane, and right next to him is Harwell. It's kind of just a profile of Harwell. And so, but he didn't stay there very long. In fact, the building was out of the office pretty soon after, like several weeks after Harwell started. But then he and Ain continued to take lessons from Neutra for free and work for him for free. And in the early days, Harris was very influenced by Neutra. This kind of gesture drawing, this is dedicated to one of his best boyhood friends. And here's another one that shows him really influenced by the Level Health House and just in the international style in general, which would perish from his sensibility pretty soon, actually. So next.
I do have a question from the audience. Someone asked, how did Schindler's module and Harris's differ, and what impact do you think that makes on the character of space or the space?
Okay, they were very different. I mean, Schindler and Neutra both used what was sort of standard for building materials, a 4-foot module. But Harris, in the small houses he designed, he thought that was too big to create the kind of space he wanted. So he would use a 3-foot module and use the extra 1 foot to form the fascia around the rooms above the molding. So you can see it in almost every house, even larger houses. He always used the 3-foot. Although the only one I think he did use the 4-foot module was the house we'll get to later. Is a very large house called the English house.
He actually lists, you can see on the plans of the 3-foot module. I'll just add, if we can see, if there's a easy way to do, well, one thing that is the same is this the ceiling plate here. So this is at 6'8". The Schindler House is 6'2", but Harris, for almost, I would say, everything he ever built, had the same plate that he would use, and it's continuous throughout the whole of the house, which is exactly the same as Schindler. And then elements moving above it. So there's a kind of, but he would not as often use a clear story as Schindler. But there is the kind of continuous plate at the ceiling height at 6'8".
Yeah, well, that was really important to Harris because it would unify the entire house because you never had, and so would color. You could feel like it was one organism. And anyway, okay. So we're back to so did we skip anything?
Nope.
So after he left, but eventually, I think, well, Neutra went to Europe, and while he was in Europe, Harris got his first commission which was for the Low House. And he designed it with bubble panels of the 3 feet and a flat roof. And what else? I can't, anyway, his clients needed a loan and no bank would support them. So he had to change everything, and he embraced the hip roof, which he would basically use off and on throughout his whole career. It was an influence of Wright and Wright's Prairie style. So he had a hip roof. He changed the bubble panels to board and batten, and what else did he? The whole house just was totally transformed after the loan was denied. And so there are pictures of the house where he had made some of the changes, but it kept the flat roof. I guess it was hard to give up. But anyway, then ultimately it did have the hip roof. And then you see here in this picture, see where the fence is, and then those little pockets before the house really starts. Those are sleeping porches. And that might probably have there's on the right is the doorway leading out to one of the sleeping porches. There are some images of beds just rolled out to those faces. But anyway, here you see his module at work and how he was really happy to be able to make this door of 6 feet. It was two 3-foot modules, and then it broken up more here. And then he used these what I would call them, these floors, these woven floors, because you could put so many sections inside of the module. They would fit right in with the rhythm that he was after, and he used them throughout his work.
Another question that's probably relevant to these images: was Harris influenced by Japanese vernacular?
Absolutely,
write about Japan or visit there?
Yeah, no, he grew up in and around sort of humble Japanese buildings. His take on Japanese architecture was pretty different from Wright's. He loved just the absolute lightness of form and the humble aspects of Japanese, the sort of I don't know, just gentle aspect of the Japanese houses he had seen all of his life. And so, yeah, you definitely see that here. And if you, to the left of the picture on the left, there's these tokonomas on either side of the wall. Yeah, he was very influenced by the spatial qualities of Japanese architecture and the lightness form.
I think what's most notable about these spaces is his use of the module. So you'll have the 1 foot of the mat, then you'll have the door frame, then you'll have these, which are going to be the same. These are going to be 3 feet here, and then you'll have it without those being broken up. So it's a constant kind of shifting of, he called them rhythmic intervals, that he wanted to have a kind of musical unfolding in the house.
Yeah, and that's true of almost every house. He has cabinets that go across that impede you going straight into a room. You have to go around them and find your way. He loved that. And he had been influenced by a teacher he had in high school who taught his classes like a journey of discovery. And I think Harwell loved that class so much, and he just sort of internalized it in his architecture. So it was always kind of getting to the climax of the living room or wherever. It was kind of something he enjoyed doing.
Should we keep going here? We've got a lot to see.
Right. This is the Lang house. This is a really early house that shows, this is when Harwell said that when he was working for Northrop, he would never introduce an idea that he didn't think Northrop would have come up with. But when he was on his own, and when he received a commission on his own, then he was free to do whatever he wanted to. And this early house was really where he was still young. He's showing his influence of Wright on it. This is a kind of a simple writing and form. But since I'm going to talk about color later, this house had the most amazing colors. It had a purple linoleum, and it had like 250 feet of book space because it was a Caltech professor who and his wife who hired Harris, even though they were friends with Neutra, because they were afraid Neutra would dominate them, and they wanted somebody they could work with, which was one of Harris's great abilities throughout his career. He really loved to work with people and give them what they wanted. So anyway,
I
that's
just include the 1988 photo when I was initially taking photographs of these houses, just to suggest how unloved they were.
yeah. Yeah.
Things have changed dramatically, but back then, these were not precious objects of art.
Yes, and then he had like a Thomas Paine, I think, was the landscape architect, and they painted wild cherry and all
Right.
these wonderful things and there they are, but and they're not.
Yeah.
They're not. Okay.
This is something I just recently found, which is the gives you a sense of how bare the landscape was when it was first built.
Yeah. This is in Pasadena, by the way. Just and this is also in Pasadena. This is the Steiger House, and the Steigers had they imported crafts and rugs and things from Mallorca, and they had a shop. And Harwell said that he had the most fun designing the shop because the house he was very proud of, but the shop on the back side, or the other side facing another street, he started working, just drawing on a piece of butter paper. And he said, I always feel like when the materials are, you know, not important and nothing is the right ideal space to be drawing in. I always do my most creative stuff. And he felt that way about the shop for the DeSiger house. And this house is the Bauer house. And one of the things I love about it is that it's sort of angled, and it's very unusual in Harris's career, the way he sort of angles all this open plan kind of out toward the landscape. And he also did something that you don't see very often in his work. He or dyed, as he would say, the trim black to look like steel. So it gives the house a more spare look, I think. But I love this house. I think it's really
It's a very
interesting.
eccentric plan for him, for sure.
Yeah. And this house is the Helene Kirshner house. She was a single woman who told Harris when she first met him that she wanted a house where she could feel Gothic in, and which was a very unusual request for him. And so he said, these are his words. He said, "In my tricky way, I created a space that on the back side of the fireplace and covered it with nice stones, and made it created an alcove. And I told her that there she could go to feel if she wanted to feel Gothic." And meanwhile, the fireplace itself was on the right side, was very beautiful, it was copper. And she also, much to Jean Harris's frustration, she ordered a piano to be delivered on the site when the house wasn't finished, didn't even have a roof. And she ordered a baby carriage, even though she didn't have a baby and she didn't have a husband. But anyway, but Harwell, Jean really didn't like it. She sent her back to the store with a pair of new shoes she had, saying, "Every penny must go to finish this house. Take those shoes back." Anyway, but Harry Harwell really liked her, and he said she, in her irresistible way, she had approached the WPA workers down the street who were building a reinforcement wall, and managed to get them to come down to her house to build this three-tiered stone. It's on a corner lot, and so she got them, the WPA workers, to finish it, and it looks pretty wonderful. And so the house with these kind of outriggers here really does resemble Schindler, I think, and the whole way of Schindler's idea of the interior dominates and the exterior kind of takes shape around the interior. That you feel that here, I think, because you see very little of the interior of the house. It's kind of clothed in this sort of redwood fence and these different levels of walls. And here is the Fellowship Park House again. And it had, I mean, let me back up. Pauline Schindler decided she didn't like the sliding doors in her. By the way, her sliding doors were not rice paper, even though they looked like it. They were chicken wire impregnated with paraffin to look like, to do a facsimile of rice paper. But she ended up not liking them because she said they rattled in the wind. And so she gave them, or Harwell bought them for $1 and put them in a little shed that was on the site of the future Fellowship Park House. And then he realized they were starting to, meanwhile, Jean had bought this lot, and they said this vacant lot with a shed on it. And the door started to warp, and Harwell decided to break down the wood in the shed and frame out this pavilion to put the doors in. And so it became a little bit more complicated than that, but it's one of his finest things, and many clients came, as I had mentioned, many our fellow architects came to meet him and Jean there and talk about what they wanted to build. But it's interesting because it was done at the same time that Philip Johnson's glass house was being built, and how different they were. I mean, Harris wanted to lose himself in nature, and Johnson wanted to be an object in the landscape.
Got another question. Just going back to the exterior truss work, quite interesting. Can you speak more on that?
About what? Excuse me.
The exterior truss work. I don't know exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I've used Harwell's exact words. I mean, in which house, the Fellowship Park?
Yeah, you can, I mean, they kind of hide it, but you can see it here. Is that
Yeah.
visible?
Yeah.
Harris had a very, I have to look it up, but specific way he had wanted those to work. And if you can bear with me, I will tell you.
Well, he's certainly not trying to exemplify them, but they are visible from from a few angles. And it's interesting that in the photographic record, which is extensive, they are not featured. And these photographs are so someone was asking about the Japanese, they certainly, qualities of his work. That's certainly how he was framed in the kind of literature, is that this was an Asian aesthetic. And these photographs really traveled all over the world. These are the ones that absolutely solidified his reputation.
Somebody mentioned, it's a comment, not a question, but perhaps we have owners of the English house since 1998 in attendance, if you're here.
Oh, is that right?
Right. We'll get there in a minute.
Oh, wow.
That's great.
It's exciting. So also, these are incidentally, that Hawken looking vase he was given to him by his grandmother, and it appears in almost every early house. If you're walking through them, you can see it's there in this little table that Jean gave him. This little Japanese table, which she got in Chinatown, is also in every image of the early years. So
It's amazing. Here's the plan. I mean, this thing is minuscule, but you can see the photographs suggest it's this kind of vast open pavilion. But it's a little bit of a trick of the eye.
When they didn't have a kitchen or a bathroom for some time, and Harris's mother, I guess, couldn't stand that, and so she gave them enough money to do both. And the house had cost like just a few $100s, and then it suddenly went up, by several $1,000s when she put it. But before that, I was just talking to Todd about this. They would take their showers and just with a hanging bag out, and one of them would look on the path to see if anybody was coming, and while the other one was showering. And so that was that way for several years. And Harwell would say that he would, I love this photograph. This is Carl Anderson was the person who got Harris interested in Fellowship Park. He had a house there right up the way from this house. And Harris would visit him there. And then when they built this house, I guess he purchased this chair from Carl Anderson, who became kind of a lifelong, off and on quasi partner. I mean, when he later on, when he entered the World's Fair, when he showed an image of how Americans would live in the future, he credited Carl Anderson because he used this chair in the show. Anyway, Harris would spray. He said, but when they had guests, he would spray the mint that was growing outside the Fellowship Park so that the whole atmosphere would have this fresh smell.
You could see the truss rods here, the three of them that hold it up.
And the kitchen, when they put in the kitchen, it had cabinets of alizarin crimson, which is kind of a transparent crimson, alizarin crimson and vermilion, and the floors were deep blue with a glaze that made them seem even deeper. The ceiling was mustard, and the trim was olive green. So it was, pretty colorful.
I'm mindful of the time. We should.
Oh, I'm talking too much. Okay, this is the Intensa house for the person who became the publisher of California Arts and Architecture, which he changed to just Arts and Architecture. So he asked for Harris for a very different kind of plan and tone than anything else he had done. And he said he had seen the Fellowship Park house, and because he said that is exactly the kind of house I don't want, but because you could do it, I think you could do the house I do want, which is this house, this more modern, kind of international style looking house. It's only like 400 square feet. It's just a very tiny house.
Yeah,
Really?
this is also in Santa Monica Canyon.
But he also said, I want it to be a masculine house. And when California Arts and Architecture published it, they said, a man's house, every inch of it. And so there it is. Okay, this is the Gutter Grandstead house. And this is kind of Harris becoming, I think, more mature. This is a real important house in his career. It faces south, which he said everyone should always face south and not, for the best views. And this is an uninterrupted view of Hollywood Hills. It had the kind of roof that he had used in the shop for the DeSagers, as we called it, a folded roof. He would raise it up and then put clear stories around it, so you got this interior light from the clear stories. And the roof of this building, he wanted a standing seam roof, and they couldn't afford it, so he devised his own. He did his cloth cap, which he put marble chips on, and then he rolled the edges up to form a gutter. And so it was one of the most visible roofs of his career, because it's not shingle it's not wooden matching the rest of the house. But what else?
Needless to say, it doesn't look anything like this anymore.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know.
The view is, yeah.
The view is definitely probably interrupted. But Julius Schulman lives across the street in a Raphael Soriano house, and he said he house sat in this house for some reason. He said it was the most wonderful experience, because he said it was just the light, the view, and everything was just so delightful. I think he almost was jealous. Okay, this is the house. I told you to keep in mind that photograph, the early photograph, because it looks like this is such a large space, in this balcony here. It looks so dramatic, and it is still dramatic, but it's much smaller in scale than it appears to be in that early photograph. Harwell, I think, was influenced by Wright's Sturgis house, which has the same sort of battered porch.
Somebody's asking about Harris's relationship with Intensa. Why wasn't Harris asked to do a case study house? And what about Harris's?
He was asked right away to do a case study. He was the first one asked, and he turned it down because this woman named Jerry Johnson, I think that's her name, had been editor, and they were very fond of her, and they thought that she was doing a great job. And she took a maternity leave, and while she was gone, Intensa sort of, with apparently, according to Harris, like very powerful lawyers, and his father is also very influential. They just took over the magazine, and Harris was so upset about that he didn't want to have anything to do with the case study. He turned it down.
Which is a remarkable story. Obviously, it affected his reception in a major way. I mean, that he wasn't part of that, I mean, speaks to
Yeah,
his, shaped the impact of his architecture.
yeah, but a principal,
Yeah,
Harris counted for a lot.
yeah,
Okay, well,
Another
I
question
love
about,
this picture because it shows how, I mean,
yeah.
Todd got this great photograph of how it's
I'll just mention that one characteristic which is going to change for Harris is he uses wood in these long, sweeping horizontals. And that's very characteristic of both of Wright and Harris at this point. But he's gonna change that style very dramatically. I mean, dramatically for Harris mid to late 40s. So he's going to turn away from this kind of long stretches of he thought that what he was using wood almost as a kind of steel, and that in that sense denying its kind of intrinsic qualities, which is that it breaks, it cracks, it termites get into it, it twists, it changes through the weather, all those things he wanted to pay heed to, which he thought that these long expanses didn't. They kind of denied that.
yeah.
so
Well,
still questions about the Grantstead house before you move too far
sure,
along
sure.
from that. Demonstrating Harris's extraordinary craft with renderings. Can you speak a little bit about his attitude and sensibility related to such beautiful renderings?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I could just say, yes, I agree. He's very talented. But in terms of his use of color, he was very insistent with his, interns, I guess you could call them, about what, how he had to define the colors. And these colors, like even the subtle, foliage and so forth, he felt very strongly about. And he could draw very well. I mean, I think throughout his career, the images he drew, well, he was just a very meticulous person, and his drawings reflect that.
I mean, I think like everyone in his generation, he was really affected by the Wasmuth portfolio. So Wright's renderings are clearly
Yes,
you know,
which went right. um, yeah, I'm sure he was.
speaking of renderings.
Yes.
Yes, no drawing. Um, well, this building was torn down in the 1970s, but I really love this for lots of reasons. This is the new Chinatown. The old Chinatown had kind of been bulldozed, and so these two young men came to him. One was 21, one was 24, I think. They were brothers, and they wanted to start a restaurant, and they didn't have really much of a budget at all. So Harwell designed this building that's redwood overlapping, but it's very rhythmic, as you can see. And he suggested that they use balloons to advertise, but they never did that. But on the interior, it was very colorful, also alizarin crimson and vermilion and olive drab around the ceiling. And he painted the rafters black, and in between the rafters and the structure, he put aluminum foil just as decoration, just crumpled aluminum foil, because and it had this kind of, you know, shiny aspect. And he said, I recently saw this, if anybody's interested, there's a podcast on this, and I found it on Google. And the two children, who are grown, of course, of the original owners, described how in the bar that the aluminum foil became golden because of cigarette smoke. And then
Oh,
there's great photos of a Buddha, the big chubby Buddha with aluminum foil right over his head. So I love that because that was just right out of Schindler's playbook, because they're using, materials that are inexpensive but had potential for design. So anyway,
lovely.
this is the Havens house, which Jean Harrow's wife called havens above.
Mm.
This is a Man Ray photograph on the left, which I think just became widely celebrated because it shows how the house worked, and it also there was also this indication of how different it was. In the next photograph, you can see the other house. There's another house right next to it, one more to the left. No, okay, never mind. I thought there was another one. Anyway, this is Juliet Man Ray on the balcony looking down. The house had, well, you can see the triangular aspect. It hovered above the side. It really didn't have, except for the badminton court, nothing was on the ground. It had a bridge over to the main section of the house from this wonderful, the bridge is on the cover of the book, actually. You go down a few steps and cross a bridge to get to the house. And what else was I going to say? The house had, you can't really see it in these images, but when, go to the next one, and I think you can see it better on the left, the interior, yeah. There were clear stories on the roof, and the way they worked, they shined light down through these skylights and brought light into the interior of the house.
Do you have any bathroom photos, Lisa, Todd?
I don't have any of the bathroom
it was
photos.
somebody's
Those are
commenting
not widely
on the
publicized.
erotic and beautiful, awesome bathroom.
Somebody has seen the bathroom there?
I haven't seen the bathroom. I don't know. Sounds like I don't know.
Well, you know, Colin Rowe, the architect and critic, said that Harwell was terrible with bathrooms. He's the most they're just practical. They just had he used the kind of sinks where you could see all the plumbing underneath them, you know. They were just simple, straightforward. But if somebody has seen the bathroom, I've never seen the bathroom at the Havens house.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I didn't. Well, okay, well, there's a bridge going across, and he designed it like a trough so that nobody could see Weston Havens playing badminton or doing anything else. I mean, you can't see down. So, okay, this is the house that you know, when Todd was talking about wood and these smooth, long swatches of wood. That is really interesting in this house because in the Havens house where he used wood, it was seasoned wood so that it wouldn't warp or, you know, have problems. The war started and you couldn't get seasoned wood anymore. So so Harwell was afraid that it would warp and have all kinds of things. So the actual body of the house is just 3.5 boards that are 3.5 inches wide, and at regular 3 feet intervals, they have battens to support them and to keep them from warping. And then down below, when he used these long stretches of boards, he overlapped them so they would have this kind of battered effect. And and these are 3 feet square. And because he didn't want the harsh sun to go into the living room. So he did or anywhere else. So he did these pockets where light would come straight down through the pockets onto the terrace and provide light, but without a harsh light. So, okay. Todd, you want to take it away?
Sure. I mean, I'll just say briefly, like he goes to New York, and when he returns, he sees the work of Green and Green. I mean, he'd known Green and Green, but Green and Green was not an established architectural identity at that point. And his wife, Jean.
When they were working on the Havens house, the contractor said to Jean, "They'll get your husband the way they got Green and Green." And by that, he meant your work will be copied so much that people won't ever really recognize the true nature of of your work. And so when they came back from New York, she was dying to find out about what he meant by that. So continue.
And so Jean Harris was writing an article on Green and Green over many years. Actually, it came out in 1948. So over these 4 years, they visited all the Green and Green houses that they can find, including meeting them. And at the same time, he came to think about Maybeck. So he was seeing the First Church of Christ in Berkeley when he's doing the Havens House from 1909, 1910. And what they both suggested to him was the broken member, so that the idea that there wouldn't be these long expanses. So if you see here in 41, 42, he's using these very long expanses of wood. With green and green, it's sticks, right, in various configurations that are short members. And this completely transformed his view in a sense. And I wanted just to show you this. He was fascinated by this malthoid roof on the Gamble House, so that the Gamble House has at once this long continuous surface, which you can't actually see in any of the photographs. So this is why it's from Google. But these long, smooth, continuous surfaces, and then down below these broken members of the sticks. And he thought that those two together were the kind of that's the vision he wanted to project from that point forward, was one that had a combination of that continuity of the roof plane, but below it, it would be broken up in various ways rather than those long expanses. I'll just show you how that resolves in an important work like this, where you can see this is much more inspired by the green and green work.
Yes. I was going to say, Jean befriended Maybeck. She had been a Berkeley student herself. And so she kind of sought out Maybeck. And so he gave her a vast amount of drawings. And in both cases, Green and Green and Maybeck, the Harrises were behind their winning or receiving the gold medal from the AIA. But anyway, so she had for years, because she always thought she was going to write a book on Maybeck. She kept the drawings until she died, and then Harwell gave the Maybeck drawings to the Bancroft Library at Berkeley.
I think he was fascinated by the kind of what he called contradictory use of materials, right? So there's a kind of, you have both concrete and wood and steel all put together in the same space. So it's both traditional and totally innovative. And I think he was, fascinated by that, both with and it's the kind of the modernity of the greens is what's lost, I think, by a lot of people. But I think he saw the kind of Maybeck side of what Green and Green were up to, that they also use these kind of contemporary materials as well with the malthoid.
Yeah, but when you get inside, I
Yeah.
mean, it's modern. I mean, I know that from I was put up in the Gamble House when I was there in Pasadena giving a lecture. And there was so much busy, like little alcoves and scary places to me, since I was alone in this big mansion. It was nothing modern about it. And so I just thought how interesting it was that Harwell could allude or pay homage to Green and Green, but then the interior becomes, him. And this is a photograph of Harris when he was in New York. And on the far left is Marcel Breuer, and then Fred McKee, who was a Houston architect. Eero Saarinen, Harris, and Catherine Ford, who has a house signed by Gropius, right? I think. And then Joseph Hudnut, who was the dean of School of Architecture at Harvard. And Harwell was kind of cast into this very rarefied crowd of architects. These are just a few. I mean, Notre had signed him up to be in the CIAM, which is Todd, help me out.
Oh God, Contemporary Institute of Contemporary. Yeah, I don't remember.
Okay, anyway, so he got to know Sert and all these other European modernists, and including they got to know they knew Sigrid Gideon quite well, and Jean was always fighting with him. But anyway,
Yeah.
next picture.
Suffice to say, he didn't fit in with the New York
No,
architectural establishment.
he couldn't wait to get back, and that's was that zeal to uncover his own regionalist roots from from the landscape he knew so well. Okay,
But
here's the
again, I
Bowery
think,
House.
yeah, I think this is trying to mime the kind of Gamble House roof with that malthoid, this kind of
Ah,
white continuous surface within the broken, stick movement below.
Yeah. Okay.
The comment from somebody just, Gordon Drake worked with Harwell on the details for the Havens house. He was a genius. As Schulman pointed out, Bangs apparently never returned the drawings that she borrowed from Henry Green when he was living in his son's house in Pasadena, where he died. They wound up not with the Gamble House archives, where they belong, but some university on the East Coast.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe
I don't
Columbia.
know. I'm
Interesting
sure that's
piece
right,
of
but
information.
I think she gave a
it's
lot of things
fascinating.
to Columbia. That's a little bit of a scandal.
Yeah.
Well, what was the first part of that question?
Send me an email.
You said there was something else. What was the first part of that?
About Gordon Drake.
Well, Gordon Drake. You know,
Yeah.
someone suggested to me that Gordon Drake had really done the Havens house, and I thought that it's not right. And so I looked it up on the drawings, and his initials are not there at all. So it's true. Gordon Drake was extremely talented, and Harwell admired him quite a bit, and I'm sure he might have played a part, but he didn't. You know, at the bottom where they show all initials of people, draftsmen and so forth. His were not there. But
Yeah.
I just want to do a little time check here.
Yep.
It's we could probably go another 10 minutes. I don't know how many more
10
slides
minutes,
you have
okay.
here.
There's
Todd.
not much word.
Okay.
Yeah, I just there's
Very-
not.
It's
The
fascinating.
interior.
I want to run out of time.
I'm so grateful to Todd for taking this photograph of the Wiley house. But you know, see how much they have really maintained it in a way
Yeah.
that is almost unchanged from.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, that's great. Thank you. This is the Harris. This is the Johnson house, and it's it embodies that same green and green
Yeah.
use of wood. And this is a house that I mean, as I said, I always felt that I was going to be seeing the original the original owners, and Travis Johnson, the son, he had done the drawings for Bambi, according to Harris, and I went up to the door, just totally cold, and knocked on the door, and I heard this boom, boom, boom coming to the door, and I felt myself being looked at through some window or a peephole, and then he walked away, and so I didn't ever get to see the inside of that house, but I really would love to have seen it, and I understand it's being really well taken care of now by its new.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, and there's an interior picture of it. These with that gable roof. He started using more and more of these big paned windows for dramatic effect. And this house has the same thing, but you can't see it in this picture. Todd was just pointing out how much has changed with all the increased vegetation and so forth. It's
painted.
So, okay, here's the English house for the relative in the audience. Mr. English had a handicap, which was a fact that had played an influence on this house. And I will say one just incidental thing that Harwell mentioned that I thought was wonderful, which was that the Englishes had two Cadillacs of the exact same color and the exact same model, because they didn't want anybody to think they had two Cadillacs. So that whenever anybody saw them, they always assumed it was their Cadillac. They didn't know that there was another one identical to it in the garage. Anyway, I thought Harris thought that was kind of amusing. But here, this house, I don't know if we have the photographs to show it. He built a staircase underneath this coffered ceiling, and it was just a beautiful staircase. It went up with wide steps all the way around until the second floor. It's a square kind of, but anyway, and it has this great amount of showering of light over it, and then there's an elevator kind of worked into the wall right next to it.
But I mean, stylistically, right, what's striking about this is how different this is from the Johnson house, right, which is right before it.
Yeah,
The
and
Johnson
so much
house
stuff.
is,
Yeah, more like Wright, and I think, and it has this kind of international style aspect too. The white
it's all
planes.
stucco. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It has from yeah, okay. This is a house. It's also Wrightian, and this is after he came to Texas. This is a house was designed for Ruth Carter Stevenson, and she was instrumental in getting Harwell, I think, hired in the first place. But then after she lured him away because he was very unhappy at being the dean of the architecture school at Austin, she enticed him to come to Fort Worth and design a house for herself and her 5 children. And it's a wonderful house. She was also a gardener, an avid gardener. In this house, it was a rare house in Fort Worth because most of the houses in her neighborhood were like English country homes or French chateau, and she wanted a modern house. And but unfortunately, recently, just in the last few years, it was her children who didn't share her enthusiasm sold it to a buyer who wanted to tear it down and build an English country house. So,
It's also quite close to the Hollyhock. I think it's his kind of deepest homage to the Hollyhock house.
yeah, I agree. There's especially on one edge, on one elevation, there's an arc that goes out into the landscape, very much like something you would see at the Hollyhock house. And then the interiors, there are courts where you can see nature and so forth. That was very much Hollyhock house thing. This house is one of my favorite houses. This is the Eisenberg house. And it was designed for some really great clients of Harris's. And in fact, when we had the exhibition, they had a desk designed by Harwell, and we came and commandeered it and put it in the middle of the show. This you see the way he handled soffits, the way he handled his eaves with those enclosed soffits. He had on the far side, he had a little balcony, which he called the Juliet balcony because he had a daughter, and that was her bedroom. He had this little balcony, which is unusual in Harwell's work. I don't know what else to say here. This is the front of the house, and there's a red-orange door that is like, lures you inside. So anyway.
I've never seen any of the Texas houses, actually.
That's a great house. This is the Unitarian church he designed, and the interior of the sanctuary looks strikingly similar to what Kahn was doing at the same time and what Wright had done many years earlier, with light coming in from the sides, like a perimeter of light around the edges. And in fact, when Harwell and Frank Harmon and I did this kind of pilgrimage of Texas houses, and we went there, and I just kicked myself in the foot that I didn't tell the minister ahead of time that we were going to be there. So we sat through her sermon and just took in the space. But later I told her, and she said, "Oh, I wish you told me ahead of time because I would have liked to introduce. We love this church and we would have liked to introduce the architect." So anyway, opportunity lost. This is Horace's house in Raleigh, where I spent many, many hours. This is a view. Look, there was kind of a mezzanine, and it looked down into the living room and to this kind of courtyard space, which I think earlier there in the tenure there they had more plants in it. But he blocked the view. I mean, they had on all sides, they had a pretty terrible view. And so he was always using translucent glass, or in this case, these tall walls. But it had wonderful details. And now it's in terrible shape. It's in terrible shape the last time I saw it. And Frank Harmon may be able to tell me it's changed, but all the paint was being worn off. Harris bought 2 lots to protect, so he could have a car for one thing, but also just protect it. It's really on the campus of North Carolina State University.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, it's a wonderful house. But I will say one more thing. If I have time, it has on the first floor, you can go through Harwell's closet and you just push the Brooks Brothers suits to one side. There's a little door, and it takes you into where he had his fireproof files and all. Gene was an amazing administrator of his affairs, and all the carbon copies of every letter that he ever wrote were
Wow.
organized, and it's a very interesting space. And then on the upper level where the mezzanine is, if you continue back, there's a separate office that he rented to T.C. Howard, who was a really interesting architect. So it had all these different possibilities.
Great.
And Lisa, I think you suggest that there's a sense in which this might be responding to the Eames
I think
office.
so. I really thought so.
I totally agree.
Because of the trusses across the ceiling, which is very unusual in his work, for one thing,
Yep.
and just the box-like nature of it.
Yeah.
But the stairs that go up to the mezzanine, and I have to just mention this, but because it was a breakthrough for me, because the stairs go up sort of rather slowly with these, wide treads. But as we were walking up it, he said, "You see how the module works and how comforting it is." He said, "You one step here and 2, 3. There's a break. 1, 2, 3 break." And he was like, and he just insisted that it was, I didn't know even know what a module was at that point. I was so green, and I thought later when Frank Harmon put me up in this house after Harwell died, I was staying in his room and remembering. I mean, I went up to the mezzanine. And he had these notes, and on the notepad, he had said his travels through the house because he had really bad legs. He had cancer in his legs, and he would take this route, and he would say how many modules he took to do this route, and how many. And I thought, this is comforting. It was comforting. Even the last days of his life, he was being comforted by the module.
Love that. Love
There's
that.
a Carl Anderson, Frank saying there's, you can see the Carl Anderson.
Yes,
chart.
right.
And Ken, is this house available to be toured, do you know?
I don't, Frank might know, Frank. Yeah, it was sold several times, and unfortunately the last time, I think it first sold to North Carolina State University, and then they sold it to somebody else who sold it to not the right people, apparently, in my opinion, because they don't keep it up. It had these wonderful little trees out in front, and I always forget what they were like Grant wood trees, cut,
Oh,
real little balls of
topiary.
foliage. Well, sort of like that, but Frank would know the word to that too. But anyway,
No, the house is in bad shape and it's not toured.
and the trees have all been cut down. All of those cool little trees he had.
Well, I think we got to wrap up here. This was fascinating and so much information and so many things that you can see. So Lisa, you can find Lisa's book on Amazon, of course, and Abe Books we were looking before. So Lisa Germany, Harwell. That's it right there. I want to thank Todd and Lisa for this really great evening, and I want to invite everybody to join us for the future. I don't have one planned yet, but please join us. Send us emails at theschindlerhouse.org if you have any ideas of these are open invitations for conversation, related, unrelated, inspired by Schindler. All of it works. So we may do one before the end of the year. We've had 5 this year, but we'll definitely be planning for 2026. And as you think about the end of the year, please consider helping us out at Friends of the Schindler House. You can donate online at theschindlerhouse.org. So have a great night, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.